Brian from the Riff looks like John Mulaney Brian here, and it is time to review the new West Side Story remake by Steven Spielberg. Now obviously, Spielberg needs no introduction. The man's filmmaking legacy goes well back into the 1970s and set the standard in some form or another every decade since. Except the 2010s. Because while he's clearly still adept behind a camera, his movies have only become more assembly line and workmanlike in the past 10 years. It's like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was the last little Jenga block holding up his prestige as a filmmaker. Because, come on, even if you love Spielberg and have a completely idealized version out of nostalgia or appreciation for how often he's changed the game, the man made Jurassic Park, Jaws, and Schindler's List, and now he's making the BFG and Ready Player One. Qualitatively, those just don't go together. With West Side Story, I found it odd that Spielberg of all people would remake something. It's not like the original movie has a monopoly on the story, because that too is an adaptation. However, trying to redo one of cinema's most famous and iconic movie musicals is gonna invite comparison no matter what. And in the case of West Side Story, the music and nature of the choreography still go a long way regardless of those comparisons. Right off the bat, Spielberg hasn't fumbled the bag nearly enough to where that doesn't come through. But this is to say nothing of how, like most remakes, fans will only tell you not to compare them if you think the original is better. Already having a version that's so classic and iconic with a whole 60 years to drill the performances, the cinematography, everything down to the cadence and timbre of the singing into our heads, it creates expectations for how these songs should look and sound. You really gotta distance yourself from those expectations, which, full disclosure, I don't think I can do. I'm a big fan of the original. Every aspect of it results in such a kinetic, striking movie. It was actually one of the first movies I saw which piqued my interest in film studies. Wise was just working circles around everyone else doing musicals back then, and even now. For instance, there's some good cinematography going on in this new one, but that doesn't change how impossibly inferior it looks as a whole compared to the original. Even just how they guide your eye around the frame. Spielberg's is fine on its own, but a faceplant in comparison, which is something I can say about most every other item you could contrast between the two. The experience I had watching this was, if you've ever seen a production of a musical where the performers are keenly aware of the Broadway recordings everybody's heard, so you can tell they're trying really hard to make the songs their own with forced inflections and etc. The Disney remakes did this too, where decisions have far less personality but are done to stand out and maybe justify the movie being there.
There goes the baker with his tray like always. There goes the baker with his tray like always.
Spoilers for the next few seconds. Here's the time code for when they're over. Rita Moreno plays a character replacing Doc, and for some ungodly reason, she's the one who sings Somewhere. It's so incredibly obvious nothing motivated this choice other than her role in the original, which kind of dissolves my hesitance to compare the two if such a great song is gonna completely shift its meaning to wink at the audience in reference to it. Some parts of the movie work on their own, independent from the original. Completely loved the rumble sequence and what they did with the musical number Cool. But as a whole, the entire movie is just so free of personality and spirit. Remember when they remade Evil Dead? And it was a fine film, but incredibly homogenized and screamed supplementary to a definitive experience of this material. Same thing with West Side Story. If I want to see this show on film, not having a copy of the original is the only thing that'll lead me to watch this again. And I do got a copy of the original on Blu-ray, so this movie's kind of fucked. I feel like such an asshole talking about this movie, because it's not bad, it's just unoptimized and overshadowed. Ansel Elgort, on top of the controversy surrounding him at the moment, is a brick wall in this film. Not a word out of his mouth convinced me he was Tony. Most of the acting in the film is fine, but he brings down the story as half of the main couple. With the other characters, an area where this remake wins by default is the dated casting of the original. Look, that first movie is great, but I am never going to be on the side of unironically making actors look darker in the manner which it did. For representation's sake, the new one's got you covered. None of the actors disappointed me, but if I had to pick, I think Riff was probably the best. Spielberg is good at wonder and whimsy, and I don't think that's a good match for the sharp edge and flair that elevated the original. It's just not in his wheelhouse. The Mambo scene in the original is like getting smacked in the face with a thunderbolt. The remake's choreography fucking rips, it's spectacular, but the pacing of every scene, dancing notwithstanding, is so languid and gray, filled with extraneous shots and actions being captured. Maybe if you can more successfully distance yourself from the original than I can, you'll enjoy this better. And for the sake of covering my ass, I enjoyed West Side Story just fine, and this is debatably the best movie Spielberg's made since, like, Catch Me If You Can, or War of the Worlds. And if the Twitter reaction is any indication, the dozen or so failed Ezra Miller clones who make up the Jets are better eye candy for modern audiences, so at least the younger people will have that going for them. I'd give West Side Story a 6 out of 10. It's not that bad actually on its own. So, did you like this movie more than me? Less than me? Well, if you care to, please tell me. And if you like not only words, but the way I arrange and then say them, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to me, Brian from the channel Brian. Thank you, and goodbye.